cheaper than our producer's underage sister, edgier than the stuff shown on late night television, newer than Kim Kardashian's ex, live from Orlando, it's Crazy Train Radio.
Hey folks, Croc back on the air. I'm so excited. Been working on this for a week. The interview we have, get ready to do right now, this man is actually being inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame in less than 3 weeks up at Madison Square Garden. But obviously it's not the only thing this man is known for. Right now we got Mr. Bruno Sammartino on the line. Bruno, how you doing?
I'm very good, Adam, and how are you?
Oh, you know what, I can't complain, sir. You know.
Good.
Every day's a holiday.
Oh, they're wonderful.
Well, you know, when we first started talking last weekend, I want to knock it out right away. You mentioned to me on the phone about wanting to squash some rumors, different things out there, and you wanted to talk about your website. You want to address that?
Well, the reason being that we got this website is because there's been an awful lot of information on the Internet, people saying all sort of different things. So I suggested to people, if they want to know just what's going on as far as me, what I'm actually saying and what I'm doing, to go to brunosammartino.info. And there they'll get the straight scoop, because it's bothersome when people even pretend to be you and make claims and say things they put on the Internet when in fact they're not true at all. So that was very bothersome to me. So I would urge anybody who's interested at all and wants to know just what's going on and everything else to just go there.
Again, that site is brunosammartino.info, and if you also go on there, which I was looking out on there, there's a documentary in the works, already filmed. What can you tell us about that?
Well, the documentary's been complete. It was complete. In fact, I just got to see it not long ago, 3-4 days ago, and I was very, very pleased with it. I'm pleased with it because it's all very factual. There's nothing added or subtracted that is not true. We made about 3 or 4 different trips back to Italy, and we even went up the mountain where we hid from the Nazis during the war. Because it had to be filmed and so forth up there. So, and then a lot of people were interviewed in my town that are still around, who went through that period, who lived through that time, and to tell, just everything that happened and so forth. And then, so it tells the story of my childhood and the war experience and getting sick with rheumatic fever and then finally coming to America at the age of 14 in 1950. And then we go on and tell the rest of the story, what took place in my life, how I got started, being a very sickly kid, how I developed myself, and how I got into wrestling and all that. So I was very, very pleased with the way it was done, like I said, because it's all factual. As far as the movie, the screenwriting is complete, and I understand there's a couple studios in Hollywood who are interested, and there are some other independents that are interested in it. The movie, it's exciting, but I just hope that I guess I won't be as excited with the movie as I am with the documentary, because I know the documentary is all 100%, and the actual people are in it, and to go through the story and that. The movie, they're gonna. Even though I have to approve everything, but I'm sure that there's still going to be some things in there. As the saying goes, they all like to Hollywoodize everything. So it'll be interesting to see how it comes. But anyway, right now that's where it's at. I understand that they're in the process of raising the funds, and soon will be looking for the talent, to play the parts.
Well, that's got to be pretty cool looking back and knowing your life story and everything, that there was enough interest that they want to make a movie about you.
Well, of course, it's interesting. Yeah, absolutely, it's interesting. But again, I hope it's nearly as good as when it does happen. I hope it will be nearly as good and as factual as the documentary. But time will tell. But of course, it's very flattering. Absolutely.
All right. Let's hit the topic real quick of the Hall of Fame. Obviously, people know who follow wrestling that you've had your issues with some of the changes that happened throughout the years of the business and whatnot. What led to the changes to say, okay, I'll do it?
Well, the changes came about, maybe, I guess it's been about almost 7 months ago when Paul Levesque, who better known as Triple H, he actually called me, and I don't know Paul. I mean, I knew him as a Triple H, one of the big superstars of professional wrestling of the day, but I didn't know him personally at all. And when he first contacted me, he said that he wanted to talk to me about the possibilities of me going to the Hall of Fame, and he says he understood all the issues that I had been very outspoken about, but he wanted to tell me that changes had been made and a lot of changes were made and even more to come. And so he started out by the drug programming, and he mentioned a doctor who heads that program. And of course, I know that doctor well. Not only is he from Pittsburgh, he's very famous. He's a world-renowned neurosurgeon, and he also happened to have operated on me on my back 3 different times. In fact, he saved me because I was at a point to where I could hardly stand or walk because I did so much damage, and my back, I had no circulation going to my lower extremities, and I was heading for, literally to a wheelchair. But he took 3 different surgeries on me, but he got me back on my feet, and today, thanks to him, I do 3 days of road work where I do 5 miles a day, and I do the other 3 days I'm still working out with the weights here in my own little gym at home. And so, I owe a lot to this man, and I know of his reputation, and I know what kind of a man he is. And when I found out that he was actually heading all the drug testing and also the wellness program to check these people with concussions and their general health period, I knew. And then, of course, I met. After I talked to Paul, I contacted Dr. Maroon, and we had several meetings together. And he assured me about how strict the testing was, and that he said, I know you never watch wrestling anymore. He says you ought to look at it, and you'll see the difference with the guys that are out there. I started watching it again, and I did see a lot of the guys that I saw on Monday Night Raw that I was watching, and they look like athletes, well built, but I didn't see the steroid era of that was so ridiculous as far as so obvious about these guys and how much of that stuff they were on. So that was very, very good. But as I continued my conversations with Paul in time, he also, told me about what they'd done about the other things that I spoke up against, the nudity, the vulgarity, the profanity that was going on. And he told me, that he would appreciate if I'd watch more because he says that they made all those changes, and he explained to me that they wanted to be more family-friendly. So I started watching it, and I watched it for a couple of months, and I saw no nudity. I saw none of that vulgarity stuff that they used to have on there, or the profanity that was so ridiculous. So given all that, and then in speaking to Paul time and again, I was very convinced that this guy is very sincere and that he really loves wrestling and he wants to do the best for wrestling. And I think that as he has gained more, in running the company, I'm sure, don't get me wrong, I'm sure that Vince McMahon is still a very big part, but I think he's giving more and more duties to his son-in-law, Triple H. And I think that he's done a fantastic job. But again, all these moves, I'm sure, that Vince had to go along with, approve of, and so forth. But look, I was very critical of them for years But critical I was, but I also want to, give them credit now because they did make the changes, and I respect that and I applaud that. I said that I would be a hypocrite if I went into that Hall of Fame under the previous conditions because I had been very critical of them, and I didn't feel right into accepting their Hall of Fame. But as I was asked a number of times by different people who interviewed me, they said, well, what if all that changes? Are you capable of changing along with them? And I said, absolutely. Well, those changes have come about. And Paul has convinced me of his honesty, integrity, that he's a man who loves the business. He was trained by Killer Kowalski, so he's very familiar with old school wrestling. And he loved that part, and I think he wants to head toward that direction as time goes. And all that combined is what convinced me that the time was right for me to go in.
Well, you brought up two things leading into my next question right there, with Paul's honesty and integrity. Do you think that was instilled in him as far as a professional side because of being trained by Killer Kowalski?
Oh, I think that very possible because the way he talks about that era, and he seemed to have great respect for that particular era, and I know how much he respected Kowalski, and I'm sure that Kowalski not only trained him, but spoke to him plenty, about the wrestling of that period. And I'm sure that even Paul, when he came into professional wrestling, and he had no say-so, I don't imagine, in the beginning, and he saw and even participated in everything that was going on. But I think that as time went on, and he was given more and more, like I say, power, I think that he understood that he wanted wrestling to be more respected. He wanted to be more family friendly, and to do that, you're going to have to make some drastic changes. Like I said, I'm sure he talked to his father-in-law about it, and I guess he had to agree to it. Otherwise, I don't know that Paul could have done it on his own. But getting to know him, and like I say, I found out pretty good as to what kind of a guy he is. I think that the wrestling has got a good future with a guy like him running it in the future.
Awesome. Well, we know you have always been about the fans and always been friendly to your fans and everything else. We actually were letting our fans know that we were going to be talking to you on this pre-tape, and they actually emailed some questions, and if I can ask you those for them, if possible.
Okay, sure.
All right. The first one is from a James Gore out of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. With the Hall of Fame coming up, do you have an idea who you would like to induct you?
You know what? When I spoke to Paul about that, he told me that, if I had somebody in mind, but he said if I would also give them the opportunity, he said they're thinking of a few people. They said that they want it to be very special, and they want someone who is worldly, someone who's known throughout the world to make that presentation. Now, they didn't mention any names, and since there was a lot of time before the April the 6th, I said that okay. I said tell me who when you decide or when you contact whoever it is that you folks have in mind, let me know, and I hope it's someone that we're all in agreement with. But if on the other hand it isn't, I'm sure that they're willing to listen to maybe someone that I might have in mind, but I haven't given it any thought because, like I said, we've been negotiating all this time about all these changes and so many different things, and so I haven't given really any thought. I'm going to give them to see what they come up with first, and then if that's not acceptable, then I'll come up with some names. But as of now, I have no one in mind.
A gentleman by the name of Pete Lynch out of Florida had emailed a questioning over that time, especially during your heyday as a wrestler. A lot of guys went back and forth between good guy and bad guy. Were you ever faced with making that type of decision on going one way or the other?
No. I always wanted to be me. There was never any question about any of that. I wanted to I had worked very hard. I competed in both Olympic style lifting, powerlifting, and I was wrestling in school, and I wrestled for about 7-8 years, before I turned pro. And I loved wrestling. I wanted to make my parents, my mom especially, both of my parents, but my mom, the history of her during the war and everything. I wanted her to be proud of me. I wanted her to know that her son was liked, and that was very important to me. So no, I never gave that any thought.
Well, speaking of that, to kind of go off direction a little bit, what did your parents think of your career choice of being a professional wrestler?
Well, in the beginning, they were very concerned because they were afraid that they felt that it was dangerous, and then that you could get hurt, and they were, of course, worried about me a lot that way. But as I broke in the business and I started making, a bit of a name for myself and all that, they were always concerned, but they also became very proud because, we had come from a pretty bad background, like I say, during that war and all that transpired, especially in my case when I came down with rheumatic fever and I was really at death's door. I mean, a doctor who saw me, who came from out of town after the war, he told my mother that he didn't think there was any hope of my survival. So, my mom had already lost 2 kids, lost a sister and a brother, and she was determined that she was not going to lose another one. So she did everything in her power. She sought help, and she had neighbors, and they put leeches all over my body, and they would have supposedly the theory is that the leeches take the poison blood out of your system. She would have me inhale fumes. She would boil water and inhale that because it's supposed to have been good for the lungs. I don't know if that stuff really worked. All I know is that I was supposed to die, but I lived. And so naturally, when I came to this country, and I was very, very frail and very weak and very skinny, once I started exercising and my appetite getting better and better, I kept growing and growing. And so my mom naturally was so delighted and happy. So was my dad, but my dad was in America during this period because he had just come before the war. So then when the war broke, all passages were closed, so he was stuck here, and my mom was stuck there with us, all the kids. And so my mom went through really hell, and so coming here and seeing me getting bigger and stronger and bigger and bigger and stronger, and naturally she would gleam. She was so thrilled. So in wrestling, she was always amazed that here's her child that was supposed to die, that got up to be 275 pounds and considered to be one of the strongest guys and all that stuff. So she was extremely proud, and I was so happy that they lived long enough to see me, have that kind of success, and because made them very, very happy.
Well, speaking of that, one more question on that sense of a term. Is this story true that when you had the broken neck incident with Stan Hansen, that you actually went home to Pittsburgh before you went and checked into the hospital, not to worry your folks?
I did go to the hospital, and I had my attorney named Bernard Spiegel, who's no longer with us, but he's a great guy. When they took me to the hospital and I broke my neck, but I knew that if word got in on the news, I knew it would get the news out in Pittsburgh that I was in a hospital in New York with a broken neck. I knew that would kill my mom. They were up there in age. They were in their 80s. And knowing my mother, and she worried about me all the time, I really did. And I told my attorney, I said, I got to get to Pittsburgh. And the hospital wouldn't release me because they said that I came within a millimeter of being paralyzed from the neck down, and they said that they were not going to take its responsibility if I left the hospital if something happened to me. I guess I understood. I guess they were concerned about being sued or whatever. But I told Bernie Spiegel, I said, look, I got to get home. I said, I don't care what. I said, I have to get home. So with the help, they put some on my neck and stuff like that, and I was able to, they took me to an airport and and got me on a plane, and then they were waiting for me when I got to Pittsburgh, and my doctor gave me hell. He said, do you know how close you came from being paralyzed? What's wrong with you? I said, look, it was important for me to come here. At least if I'm in a hospital in Pittsburgh, my parents, my brother or my sister will bring them over and they can see me. I can talk to them, and I'm sure that it'll be a lot better than just hear that I'm in a New York hospital with a broken neck. And so I took a risk. It was a bad risk, but it was good because my mom was there every day and to see me, and doctor told her, that I was been in great shape and that I was going to come out of this and recuperate and all that. It made a world of difference to her. So I knew how important it was for me to come home, and I had to.
Okay. Well, we had a question coming from Greg from Cleveland, Ohio. He actually had two. Who would you say was your toughest competition, and is it true that Bobo Brazil was probably your best tag team partner?
The first, the toughest, there were so many great guys in my era. I felt so privileged that I had the opportunity to wrestle these guys. Guys like Ivan Koloff, was great. Killer Kowalski, Don Leo Jonathan, Big Bill Miller, Turo Tanaka, Monsoon. There were so many guys. I wouldn't dare mention one person and say he was stood above all, because they were all great in their own way, and I had great respect for all of these people. As far as Bobo Brazil, of course I liked Bobo. He was a great guy. He was a good, decent man, a giant of a man. Bobo was 6'5", 310 pounds or something, and I tagged with Bobo quite a few times. And there's no question, I loved the opportunity to tag with him. I don't know if I want to say necessarily there was certainly on top of the list, but I loved being with Dominic DeNucci, who was my dear friend, who, we came from the same neck of the wood in the old country. So whenever we had the opportunity to be tag team partners, I thoroughly enjoyed that a lot, because I had a lot of respect, and I liked Dominic. So that was one of my favorites as well. But I tag teamed with Rocca in the very early years of my career, which was great because I'd been watching guys like Rocca on TV, and I had great respect, and I admired them. There were quite a lot of guys, but most of my bouts were single. I didn't have a whole lot of tag team matches. But again, I don't want to pick any one, but I enjoyed them all. Bobo absolutely was one of the ones on top of that list.
Well, speaking of the early days, because you mentioned tag teaming with Mr. Rocca there, you were going back and forth, because obviously you got your revival in Toronto and had a lot of work up there and working for Vince Sr. Back in 65,
Not for Vince Sr. When I went to Toronto, I was working for Frank Tunney.
Yeah, no, I said you were working in Toronto and doing some stuff for Vince Sr. So you were kind of doing both at the time.
No, that's not right. What happened was that when I left, when I went through a period where things weren't going well, I got out of the area, New York, where I started. I left that area. I went back home for a while, in fact, even got a job. But then I had an opportunity to go to Canada. And when I went to Toronto, I stayed there for a year and a half, strictly out of Toronto for Frank Tunney's office. When the opportunity came up with Drew McMahon, who offered me an opportunity to go in with Buddy Rogers, then when I came in back in '63, in May in '63, when I wrestled Buddy Rogers and took the belt, then at that point I had promised Frank Tunney, who had been very good to me for giving me a real opportunity, and I was, like I said, I spent a little over a year and a half there. He wanted me to come to if I would wrestle for him in the Maple Leaf Garden every other Sunday. So when I came back as champion and I was with the Worldwide Wrestling Federation, at that time, yes, I would go every 2 weeks and work the Maple Leaf Garden for Frank Tani, and I did that for, I don't know, maybe 3, 4, 5 years. But that's the only time that I, say, worked for Vince and made the occasion, go for Tani every other week. But for the year and a half, I worked strictly and only for Frank Tani, and his TV went all over Canada. So I just traveled all over Canada, but always out of Frank Tani's promotions.
Okay. Well, in this time period, first of all, was it true that you had issues with Buddy Rogers had issues with you? And
Buddy and I never liked each other. But, from the beginning, Buddy and I never liked each other. I mean, he's gone now, God rest his soul, but he didn't like me and I didn't like him at all. Yeah, that's true.
That's any walk of life, there's people like that. So, during that same time period, the NWA, I think it was around 64, 65, actually wanted you to work with Lou Thesz, but you turned that opportunity down. Is that true?
I had worked with Lou Thesz when I was in Canada, but this time was to unify the title. They wanted the NWA got together with the Vince McMahon and Toots Mond of the WWF, and they wanted to make a one champion. There was going to be only one champion. There wasn't going to be an NWA and a WWF champion. It was going to be one champion. I was not involved in any of the meetings that they had during that period of time. I understand Lou Thesz was, but I was never asked to be in one of the meetings or anything like that. But I found out through the grapevine, well, actually through a guy that I got along very well who was with Vince McMahon and Toots Mond, who worked for them, by the name of Phil Zacco. Phil Zacco, who was, I considered him a very good friend, and we used to talk a lot whenever I saw him in Washington. And he told me that the conversations and meetings that were going on, that if I won the title, but there was a problem that the NWA president, which was Sam Mushnick, and Vince McMahon, they were trying to work out who would get what days of the month. Sam Maneker needed, I believe at the time, if I remember correctly, he said he needed about 17 days or something like that. And McMahon said no. He says, we have too many big clubs in the Northeast. He says, all our cities have huge arenas, more so than any place in the country. He says, and we have to have Bruno to be in those clubs. So, and then to do some TV dates. So McMahon wanted me like, I don't know, 18, 19 days. In other words, between the two of them, they're talking like 36 days out of the month. So when I heard all this stuff, there's only 30 or 31 days in a month, and these guys, the way they were talking, in other words, I would be working every single day of the month. I would have no time off at all. So when I heard that from Phil Zacco, I had a meeting with Vince McMahon Sr. and Toots Mond. And I told him, I said, look, I don't know what you guys are discussing as far as the dates. I understand that the date is the problem, the issue. I said, I want to make something very, very clear. I says, right now I get 2 days out of the month to go home and see my family and my parents and my wife, and my kid at the time. And I said, and I'm going to speak to Frank Tani, I said, to tell him that I hope he'll forgive me, but I won't go there on Sundays anymore because 2 Sundays out of the month is not enough. I have to be home more than that. And so I said, so you guys can discuss the dates all you want, and it's fine with me. I don't care who gets what dates, how many dates. I said, as long as forget Sundays. Sundays are going to be mine. Sunday is my one day that I'm going to be home with family. Well, when Toots Mond and Vince, now you realize that on a 30-day month, now we're talking 26 days, and 26 days with what Sam Mushnick, I said Sam Maneker, not Sam Mushnick, he was the promoter. Sam Mushnick wanted and what Vince needed. Toots Mond said, look, he told Vince, I guess, he said, look, he said, we're doing great. He says they want to unify the title because we will become number one, more or less. And he says, and all we're going to do is weaken ourselves by spreading our champion, that far off. They said, I think we should let things go as they are. And then that decision was made because I stood by my guns, and Frank Tani was a gentleman. When I spoke to him about that, 2 days out of the month just wasn't enough, and he understood, and he said, well, maybe once in a good while, maybe you'll make an appearance for me, and I said, absolutely, and I'd be happy to. And that's why that never came about, because it was that question of who needed how many days, and they would have had me going 30 and 31 days out of the month. I would have never had a day off, and that, of course, was kind of ridiculous. So that's what killed that deal.
Okay. Well, I have two more questions because I said we would keep you a long time. The first one would be the infamous backstage fight with a football player. What can you tell us about that actual story? The truth behind it.
I was actually. When I came back as a color commentator with Vince McMahon Jr. in September of 1984, in 1985, 86, I forget if it was, maybe 86, they had a show at the Civic Arena here in Pittsburgh, and I was asked if I would handle that show that night because of the regular, the agent who would be there for the WWE, something happened, he couldn't be there. So I said, okay, that I would handle the show. While I was over there, you have to know the Civic Arena in Pittsburgh, it had in the hallway going to the different dressing room, it was a very narrow hallway. And I happened to be in the hallway. I was talking to the commission doctor, actually, and I seen these 6 guys come down that little hallway. And I knew that they didn't belong back there. And I approached them very nicely, and I said, hey, fellas, I said, I don't know how you got back here, but you can be back here. And one of them stuck his hand out to shake my hand, and I shook his hand. And when I shook his hand, he started really squeezing my hand. And so I caught on that, these must have been wise guys. And so I looked at the guy, and I said, well, what do you think you're doing? And he proceeds to say to me, he says, you're nothing but a washed-up old man. I was about 51 or 52 at the time when this happened. And, that ticked me off, because I didn't deserve that, and I had been nice with them as I approached them. So I responded. I said, well, not too old and washed up to knock you on your can. And with that, the guy took a swing at me. Well, I ducked it, and I nailed him, and he went down, and now I'm trying to keep all of them in front of me, because if they got behind me and that, I would have been in a lot of trouble. So I was kicking and punching and doing everything I had to do to fight these guys, and the Sheik was taking a shower. He had just wrestled a while before, and he heard the commotion, and when he looked out, the shower area came to look at that hallway, he saw me alone, with these guys. And he immediately he was all wet, soaking wet. He came slipping even on the way running over towards me, and he joined me. And we did pretty good. We kind of cleaned house a little bit, and that's what happened. One of them was the football player. One of them had been a ball player. He had been with the Pittsburgh Steelers, I think, for a year or two, and then he played for the Canadian football leagues. I think Hamilton and some other place. I'm really not sure. I didn't know the guy at the time. I didn't know who he was. But anyway, that's what happened.
Yeah, I just find that hard to believe that the Iron Sheik was the only guy to, come out and help defend you.
Well, I was disappointed too, because there were plenty of guys there, and there were others, and I will not mention names, but there were others who saw what was going on. But the Sheik was the guy who came and helped me out.
Yeah, because people have a lot to say about him, but for stuff like that, for him to say, I'm going to go stand up for Bruno means a lot.
Oh, and he did, and I appreciate it. I always respected him, because this guy had a tremendous reputation as an amateur wrestler. He represented Iran in the Olympic Games. He was in the Pan American Games when he came here. I mean, this guy was a tremendous athlete, and I had great respect for him, and as a pro, he certainly made his mark in professional wrestling. So I've always had great respect for the Iron Sheik.
Well, the last thing that I want to ask you for good, though, for tonight is that I found most interesting is that you actually had a private meeting with the Pope. How did that come about?
Well, it came about that I knew there was a Monsignor Fusco who had the parish in a town outside of Pittsburgh named New Kensington. And he had come from Italy many years before, and he was he was a guy that was extremely respected in the Catholic Church. He had done a lot of things for the poor. He had started the St. Anthony Orphanage here in Pittsburgh. He was truly a great man, and he liked me because I came from the old country, and because he liked the way I presented myself on TV as he watched me, and he asked to meet me, and he was up there in age. He was like, I don't know, maybe 78, 79 years of age at the time. And so on that day that I come home on a Sunday, I met with him, and he was just, to me, he was awesome. He just seemed like a holy man. I mean, he was just a wonderful man. And he asked me if I'd ever been back to Italy since I come over, and I told him that my wife and I and my youngest son, my son at the time, my first son, that we had planned on making a trip back to Italy. I wanted to go back to my hometown, see my relatives and all that. And he said, he says, my boy, he said, I would like you to have an audience, a private audience with the Pope. And I looked at him like, were you kidding me or what? I said, and I smiled. And he said, no, he spoke with a very heavy accent. He said, no, my boy, I am very serious. He says, I want you to meet Pope Paul VI. He said, and I want to make that happen for you. And I said, my goodness, I said, Monsignor, I said, that would be the highlight of my life. And he said, when are you leaving? And I told him, and he said, I will make arrangements. Next thing I know, all arrangements were made when I was flying to Rome, and he was having somebody meet me and my wife and my son at the airport. We went to the hotel we were staying, and then I was instructed somebody from the Vatican would contact me. They did, and then someone came over to the hotel and spoke to me and told me how you go about this, different steps that had to be taken. And we did everything, and then the day came that we actually had the audience with the Pope, and I was beside myself. I couldn't believe it, and frankly, I probably didn't make a great impression because I was so nervous. When we finally met His Holiness, I kissed his ring, and my wife did the same, and my boy was looking at him, and I was lost for words. I just didn't know what to say. I think my wife just said that thanked them for such a great honor, in our lives and that. And he gave us his blessing, and then he said, well, you just asked where was I born in Italy, and I answered him, but I was very nervous, and I couldn't. Thinking back afterwards, I could have kicked myself because I felt, wow, it was such a great thing to happen to you, and to be lost for words. But that's the way it was, and it's something you couldn't help. But we had about I don't know, maybe 20 minutes we spent with him, and my son was speaking more to him, saying, hey, I saw you on TV, because the Pope had come to the States here maybe 6-8 months before that, I think. And he's asking my son if he knew how to bless himself and all that, and he asked us, he wanted to know if my wife was Italian also, and stuff like that. We answered everything. He was very nice, but like I say, I said some things I don't even remember because, like I said, I was just a nervous wreck. But so, but it did happen, and I have that memory, and I have photos which I've shown many times since, but at the time I had promised that they would never be used for any kind of publicity in that. and I never did that. I showed that only after I retired. I showed and printed pictures of the audience with the Pope.
Yeah, I'm not much of a religious person, but for something like that to happen is amazing, because the Pope, you can't go just knock on the Pope's door for sure. So.
That's for sure, yes. Yes, indeed. That was one highlight of my life.
Yeah, rightfully so. But April 6th, Madison Square Garden, selling it out one more time for the WWE Hall of Fame. Get information about the movie, the documentary, everything going on that's truthful about Bruno at brunosammartino.info. Bruno, thank you so much tonight, and in a couple weeks, we'll see you up in New York.
Great. Well, thank you, Adam. Thank you for having me on. I enjoyed being on and talking to you and all your listeners. I want to wish them all very well. And yes, hopefully we'll see you in a few weeks back in good old Madison Square Garden.
Yes,